These two games will make anyone fall in love with chess. The first game is between Runau against Schmidt. Black goes here for knight c6, but then transposes it into the Scandinavian defense. Now the d4 pawn is attacked, therefore white protects it. Black goes bishop g4, putting the spin on the knight. And in addition to that, since knight is a defender of the pawn on d4, it also puts more pressure onto this pawn. White neutralized the pin and black castled queenside. We can already see a fairly aggressive setup from the black side. They exert fairly strong pressure along the d-file, and also they're still taking aim at that pawn on d4. You may actually consider playing a similar variation for black, but I actually recommend to play it slightly differently. I have another video where I analyze in details, and I already got almost 200,000 views, so you may love to check this out. I'll link it down. Anyway, white played pawn to c4, attacking the queen. White says, hey, I don't want to be a defender, I want to attack. Hey, I'm playing white, I have enough extra tempo, why would I wish to defend? So white attacks the queen and goes away, and now white keeps pushing its pawn to d5. Similarly attacking the knight here on c6, even though it's not the actual threat yet, as the pawn is pinned, and white cannot take the knight, or else they would lose the queen. But black player also keeps playing aggressively. They first of all traded off this knight and then played queen to e5, putting the queen back into the center and also delivering this check. Even though white has a number of ways to protect the king, all of them have certain drawbacks. For example, if white would just move the king away, in this case white would lose the right to castle, and the king here is stuck in the center, the rook stuck on h1, so that's not what white wants to do normally. Instead, if let's say white covers the king by the bishop, then black can jump here with a knight on d4 to put some more pressure, or can play e6, once again taking advantage of this pin and trying to win this pawn on d5. Therefore, black would have a pretty good position here. So it seems that white is a bit of in trouble, but instead of playing bishop to e2, white played bishop to e3, which also blocks the line for the queen, but there is a drawback as it loses the pawn on b2, and black happily grabbed it, probably thinking that they just won a pawn for nothing. And instead of trying to protect the rook, which is hanging here on a1, white played another unusual move. He simply castled, letting black take the rook, but that's not even the end of this combination. It's actually the beginning. White took here the knight, sacrificing this time the queen on d1, and now white has this intermediate check, pawn takes b7, delivering check to the king, and the pawn is ready to be promoted potentially, therefore black decided to block it, and white recaptured on d1. White just sacrificed a pawn, a rook, and a queen, and yet his position is rather dominating, because the black's queenside pieces here are stuck, and the king is in the corner, also doing nothing, and all at the same time white is ready to play rook d8 checkmate. So it's a really interesting position, but of course the game is not over. Black played pawn to c6. Black has an extra queen and definitely they want to keep fighting. Playing pawn to c6 breaks the connection between the bishop and the pawn, and therefore black wants to simply win this pawn on b7, and after that white will probably be lost. Therefore white took it here on c6. Rook d8 here is coming, and black prevented it by playing king to c7. And now the position seems to be really unclear once again, as, for example, white can't just play bishop f4 check, as e5 would block it. Notice that the pawn is protected by the queen. It's really not easy for white to finalize the game here. Let's take him back here. Instead of this, he played rook d7 check. Black took the bishop on c6, probably hoping for b8 queen, and then black would take here the rook on d7. Currently black has an extra rook, and it's unclear if and how white can checkmate black's king. That's what black was hoping for, but instead, let's take just one move back here. Instead of this, white played an amazing shocking move, b8 knight. This gradient promotion actually delivers a checkmate, because it attacks the king and also protects the rook so that it can't be captured anymore. It's a really unusual position where white under-promoted a pawn into a knight, delivering a checkmate from b8 square, which is normally owned by the black knight, right? In the original setup, the black knight should be standing there, not white. So it's just something absolutely astonishing, and one of the best games I've ever saw over almost 30 years of me playing chess. The second spectacular game was played between Levitsky, a Russian chess player, against Frank Marshal, who was one of the strongest players at the time. It was black to move, and Marshal here started a little combination by playing rook takes h3. this is not really a sacrifice, as if the rook is captured, black has a really strong killer move knight to f3, which is a triple attack to the white's king, queen and rook. Therefore, that is not an option for white. But it was still not the end, because instead of that, white played a counter-attacking move, rook to c5. The position remains to be complicated, as currently the black's queen is hanging right here, the rook is still hanging, maybe white's ready to jump with the rook to c7, and together with the queen to start counter-attacking black's king. Therefore, the position is certainly not easy, and black still needs to find a way to get out of all of these threats. And the way Marshal did it is the way that really saved his name in the history of chess. He played queen to g3, a paradoxical move which may look like a mouse sleep in our computer age, but of course at that time there were no computers. So what's the point here? Well, first of all, the move was so spectacular that reportedly the spectators actually originally was shocked, then they started to applaud, and ultimately they started to throw gold coins onto the chessboard cheering Marshal. Therefore, if you ever wanted to get rich quick playing chess, that's the legit way of doing that. You just play the best move of all time, so that's it. Now, what's the point here? Even though white can capture this queen in multiple different ways, they all are losing one way or the other. For example, if white takes it with the h-pawn, then the end comes really soon, it's knight to e2, checkmate. Now let's take a move back. What if white captures it with the f-pawn? In this case, knight still goes to e2, now white's king can go to the corner, but then rook takes f1 is another checkmate. Finally, if the queen is captured by the white queen, which is a better option, still knight goes to e2, king h1 is forced, knight takes here the queen on g3, and it cannot be captured, which is also a fairly interesting position where all of these black's pieces are under the massive fire of the white's pawns, but they can never be captured. The h-pawn cannot take it as it is pinned down to the king. The f-pawn cannot capture it because then black would win the rook here on f1 and also checkmate the white king. Therefore, the last move to play is simply to go with the king back to g1. But then black can simply take the rook, and here, as the result of this forcing line, black has an extra knight and a winning endgame. Let's take a look at this beauty once again. Here black played queen to g3, and a move like that can make you fall in love with chess for life. And here's one bonus game where it is actually your turn to find the winning move for white. It is white to move. The game was played by Mises, one of the strong players of the past, in his simultaneous exhibition against an unknown opponent. So please think about it, and if you can find the winning move, please write it down in the comments below. And if you ever dreamed of becoming a chess master yourself, then you can check out my masterclass by clicking the link on the screen or below the video, where I share with you how many of my students actually did just that.